taking a critical look at the gaming news of the week. This is Augmented Reality, presented by the Triple S League.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Augmented Reality Podcast, your source for news, leaks, and insights about games and the gaming industry, and of course, that coveted analysis. We will bring that as well, talking today about some exciting things interesting things. Some exciting, some not so exciting with regard to upcoming tech, and a demo of Unreal Engine 5 that happened live this morning, which we were able to catch. I know a lot of you did as well. We're going to talk about that quite a bit. You're asking about a bunch of games in the chat. We'll try to talk about all of those as well. But anyway, my name is Ash, and I'm here as always with Cybsidian. How you doing today?
Hello.
So yeah, Unreal Engine 5 kind of came out of nowhere. I believe it was teased in a tweet yesterday, and then the live stream happened this morning. Wonka Bars is asking, did they drop a nuke today or what? I would not call it a nuke. I would call it, we saw a very cool tech demo that showcased some very cool things, but we have lots and lots of questions still, and even some concerns about what this might mean for games going forward.
I'm very concerned about it, and we'll talk about it later. We've talked about this subject before, and right now is a really, really good time to really get into this. But there was a couple of moments in the stream where they seem to like allude to or kind of like say, oh, this is the first time this has ever been done. We've been seeing this tech for the last year and a half. I've been seeing this tech for the last 3 years. This is not new tech.
Well, we knew it was coming.
This is new.
Everybody knew this was the first time we'd seen it in action. Mm-hmm. And so I think, it's not entirely unfair for them to say, yeah, this is the first time no games have been made with this yet. This is new in terms of development. Yes, we knew this kind of thing was coming.
Yeah.
And it was really cool to see it in action. But there was a lot we didn't see in the demo as well. Like I said, we have a lot of questions, so we're going to dive into all of that. But first, I want to answer a couple of questions that are already coming in via the live chat. By the way, do drop your questions and comments in the live chat. We'll read and respond to as many as we can throughout the podcast. And please don't forget to slam that like button. It likes it rough, and it tells us and YouTube that you appreciate this content. So we had Jamie Rose in the chat asking, what do you think of Mass Effect Remastered? So we've been hearing rumors that this could happen. Cyb, you're more up to date on this than I am. What are we hearing, and what might actually happen with that? And then I'll get into my reaction to it.
Yeah. So right now they're in a bad way with the Mass Effect story and the general universe surrounding it. They really wrote themselves into a corner. They really, really, really did write themselves into a corner. And they really did it even before they put out the series. They started the series with humans being the newest addition to the Mass Effect universe, with humans having just discovered one of the gates and activated it, leading to the Turian War, and that was very quickly squashed by the Galactic Council, and then they kind of very quickly moved into this whole, absorbing thing. They handed out some colonies, and then that was it. That's more or less where the game started at. There was a little bit, there's a few years, right, obviously, but it's not that much time. Is it enough time that they could go back and create a new story within that Turian fight and battle and all of that storyline there, pre Mass Effect 1? They could, but it's a very narrow space, and really all you have is the Turians and a very select handful of the aliens that you saw in the first game. As far as official records and lore goes, and I mean they can retcon this stuff obviously, but there were no Hanar, there were no Elcor, there wasn't even very many Asari that were caught up in the conflict. So you're talking there was next to no there was no Geth obviously, and a whole bunch of other species.
But you're talking
that just were
pre-Mass
not-
Effect 1 now.
Yeah, pre-Mass Effect 1. So they have written themselves into a corner. They can't really do a prequel unless they retconned a whole bunch of stuff. So they can't do a prequel. So that means that they have to use the lore as is set up. And this is why they went to Andromeda with the other game. So I'm trying to be quick here. So their options for a new game to introduce to the Mass Effect community is very, very limited. They have to retcon something major, they have to make major decisions, or they have to go in and do something that is not necessarily accurate, or they just have to drop humans from the whole story, which may or may not, I mean, it typically doesn't work. Humans have this thing where they like to play as humans or have human-related things, and while, certainly they could do it, not having humans is kind of a weird thing. So again, they'd have to retcon something. They'd have to do something really weird. They'd have to really stretch the lore in order to like make a game that happens before the current Mass Effect series. So they want to bring Mass Effect back. They want to reintroduce it to everybody. Their only option really is to do either a remaster, which is a good idea, generally speaking, especially if they can merge all of the gameplay into a singular game that you plug in and you start to play from, essentially it's Act 1, 2, and 3, really, is what it would end up being. And each of those games would end up being quite big and broad. They could add a lot of content kind of in between to have a bunch of additional hidden stories, maybe cover some of the characters and companions that we didn't really get to see in other things, and really kind of expand on a lot of things. That's probably from a standpoint of production, surprise factor, all this other stuff, that's probably the best thing to do, because you would guarantee that most people would pick up this new remaster and play through the original story of the trilogy in its completeness, and then they could tweak some things here and there that would open up the ability for them to create a story post Mass Effect 3 that's not Andromeda. Because, I mean, technically speaking, Andromeda wasn't even post Mass Effect 3. It happened between Mass Effect 2 and Mass Effect 3 when they left, and then hundreds of years passed. They have no contact with their home galaxy, and then things turned out the way it was. They could try and carry on the Andromeda storyline. The Quarian arc is actually kind of interesting, but unfortunately I think that's not really an option to them, because it doesn't have the same gravitas, it doesn't have the same connectability. So they've really penned themselves in here. So they're going to have to find some way of taking the story forward. And I mean, the writers are kicking themselves. That ending really nailed them in, because you essentially have only two options. Either you get rid of all of the gates and have everybody jumping around in FTL drives, barely FTL drives, which means that it's basically going to be impossible for them to have a one world or a one galaxy government. It would be good, and there was definitely it's probably their best option. Their second option is to go with the whole synthesis thing. Was it called synthesis or something else? Where they merged tech and flesh together. That's their only other option, which again opens up a lot of story narratives for that too. So that's kind of more or less their two options. So it's kind of weird. They have logically speaking, when you sit down, you look at it from a logical point of view, from a storyline point of view, the absolute best thing that they could possibly do is to remaster the story, add a bunch more stuff, add a bunch more canon, add a bunch more lore, and give them the ability to write themselves out of the box that they got written into with the ending of Mass Effect 3. So that's more or less where we're at the moment. And so yeah, a remaster probably the better idea. Could they surprise us with coming out with a new story? Maybe. Like I said, they could do probably a single series, like a single game featuring like the Turian War. If it was going to be incredibly small and if it was going to focus in on a handful of the characters that we know were around at that particular time, if they cover more of an exploration slash colonization effect shortly after that in the years leading up between that and Mass Effect 1, that's possible too. But then you have a lot of things, right? Like you can't have anybody discover the Reaper threat because that's what Shepard did. So if you're going to have a hero that discovers the Reaper threat and it has some kind of like work in that field or in that storyline, then you're going to end up kind of breaking things down. So yeah, they really nailed themselves into a corner, and now they got to get themselves out of it. And I think the best way to do that is to do a remaster of the first 3, add in a whole bunch of extra story, add in some extra stuff, combine all the DLCs, make this like ginormous super pack, this awesome thing, this awesome narrative.
Yeah.
Which would be a what do you think of this, Ash? If they had a like if they turned in the story into an episodic thing that you could watch essentially as a show. And kind of like instead of playing through the whole thing, you'd have an option to basically just like sit down and watch the show play out. And have them like have some narration where some of the combat was, like kind of do that. They could almost do that with some of the new tech. Actually, strangely enough, kind of combines it with the Unreal 5 talk that we're talking about. Is they could do that and have something that would essentially be a pretty darn good show to watch.
True,
what do you think of that?
But why would I want that as opposed to actually playing the game? A Mass Effect show would be cool, but I don't want it to be the same as what's in the games.
Well, the thing is that it would be basically the show or the game that you play through, and that way you could actually get through the content in like 10 hours rather than 40 per game, right? So that's kind of where.
Yeah, are you suggesting this as an alternative to doing a remaster?
No. This would be like part of it. I because they've done this before. They did this with so they did this with the Dragon Age thing. Is they created a movie with basically like in-game graphics and some other stuff. And they put that out as a movie that was a connection to the show or to the game. And it was kind of.
I mean, that kind of thing is good for if you want to recap. You don't remember exactly what happened. You want a recap of what happened before, or you're jumping into a later game and haven't played the previous ones. Mm-hmm. But we're still talking about now years of development spent on a remastered trilogy, and then them finally, potentially, if they do a good job of that, moving on to more Mass Effect content.
Yeah.
That's a sad state of being, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, and I mean they really are, and I think looking back on it right now is one thing, and we can kind of definitely say yes, but I think if you go ahead like 10, 15 years, I think looking back on it, we can society like future game historians will look back and say the dumbest, stupidest mistake of BioWare in general, aside from signing on with EA, which I mean maybe is debatable because they did bring money, but maybe one of the biggest things that they failed at, one of the biggest mistakes that they made, was deciding to take the Mass Effect series and end it as a trilogy. Like, I really just want to slap the person who came up with that concept. Whenever I hear somebody who's like, I've written a story, but it's self-contained and it's only meant to be, a trilogy, or it's just a single one-off story, and that's it. And I don't care to have written anything else in there that allows it to expand past that. Well, if you have a fandom that creates itself like the fandom did around Mass Effect, like Mass Effect was getting to the point where it was like it was hitting like cultural like center mass. I know there's a term for this, but I've forgotten it. Um, but it critical mass. Sorry, so it was hitting critical mass of like all of my friends knew who Commander Shepard was. Everybody I talked to was aware of the N7, right? The whole concept around Mass Effect was starting to build and build and build and build. And just when it was starting to get to this peak, what did the idiots decide to do? What did the absolute idiots decide to do? They're like, "Oh, hey, I've got an idea. Let's just can this whole thing. Just end it, and then we're just going to give it this huge space of several years, and then when it comes out, we're going to have it carry on in a completely different galaxy with a completely different storyline with completely different everything." It's like this is one of the dumbest things I have ever heard anybody come up with for any kind of a merchandise concept. It's like if Mickey Mouse suddenly decided that, oh hey, we're gonna just make one-off cartoons, and it's gonna be a different character each time. It's like that stuff doesn't work. People like familiarity. They like to have a world in which they know that they can return to. But for some odd reason, a bunch of idiots were sitting around a table and decided, hey, yeah, we're just going to make this a trilogy, and then that's it. We're going to walk away from it. There's going to be no like continuation. We're gonna create this new thing with mech power suits anyways, and that's going to be so much better.
Yeah. Putting
like-
a cap on it and saying, this is where we're ending it. Period. Not
Yeah.
leaving the
Dumb.
door open for more expansion in that universe. That was definitely a mistake. But anyway,
Yeah.
that's kind of a side topic we got onto based on a question in chat, but a very interesting one is Simon and I were talking about that earlier today. Actually,
You're going to hear more about Mass Effect in the next probably in the next couple of months. BioWare and EA need wins. They really need to up this. EA is trying to up their game. They're definitely going to have kind of like a big like, hey, this is what we're working on, and it's going to be super cool. We're going to get a huge dump, probably a huge dump this year. Right now, I'd say it's like 50-50. We may or may not get a huge dump on the next Dragon Age game. But for sure they're gonna update something on the Mass Effect thing. Last year they teased a couple of images. They've got something going on there because they need to foster this goodwill, which means trying to remind everybody as often as they can about all those good times that we used to have together, guys. Come on, we used to have so many good times. Don't you remember? Remember those good times? You remember Commander Shepard? Remember Commander Shepard? Commander Shepard's pretty awesome.
yeah.
So yeah, we're gonna get this stuff.
My feeling on this,
for
though,
sure,
I mean,
sure. It might not be substantial, but we're gonna get it.
well, it'll be interesting to see. But my feeling on this kind of echoes what Notional's saying here. I'm not really up for a trilogy remaster. They are still too new. The trilogy still ends horribly, and it's just over. Make something new. I'm kind of along those same lines. It's
Also, this is kind of a connection with this story. We're starting to hear some rumors. These are rumors right now, but if you hear about this in the next year or two, you remember back to this and you go, "Oh my God, Saib is like a seer." E3 is most likely going to be losing their exclusivity deal with Disney for Star Wars games. They are almost certainly going to lose it in the next few years.
EA, you mean? You said E3.
EA. Oh, derp. Yeah, so not E3. EA is going to lose their deal with them. Will they still continue to make Star Wars games? Yes. Will they be exclusive? No. And this is really what Disney is in need of money right now. They're in need of a lot of money right now. They man, they just bought out Fox at the worst possible time, and they are bleeding money everywhere. Things are going down, things are happening. Their whole like their amusement parks are a gigantic black hole of flaming debt right now, due to all of the stuff that they were doing in the last 3 years leading up to this current world situation, then the current world situation, and now they need money. I suspect strongly that they will open the door to people working on any kind and every kind of game that Disney could possibly get somebody to work on, so long as they cover the costs and they get a big, that their partners will cover the cost, and that Disney gets this big old cut of all the money that comes in from that licensing agreement. So we've seen this with their Disney toys recently. There's been a deluge of Disney apps on the App Store, which are all microtransaction, heavily predatory towards children, absolutely gong busters as far as like trying to spam you with like, hey, buy this, buy this, buy this, buy this, buy this now. And Disney's getting 60% of those cuts from what I've heard. That's not a guaranteed number, but they've been getting a huge cut of that money. This right now is making them sit up and go, oh, okay, well, you know what? We're bad at making games ourselves, but we're just going to license all of our stuff to as many people as they can, so long as they can get a game out and kind of stick to more or less, whatever, then we don't care at this point. We need money. 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 So this is what is going to happen. And I suspect that this is already in the works because EA has canceled more of their Star Wars games again. Now a lot of this stuff was like early, like procedural stuff, like concept stuff. A lot of it just got trashed again. So this means that they're scaling back on what they're doing with Star Wars. And I think they're doing that because they know that they're going to be losing this license. So this is super huge news. Just heard it. It's a little off the wire. And of course, it's like, take it with a grain of salt, because right now, I don't even think Bob Iger or the other Bob who's running Disney now, I don't think any of them know what's going on right now. I think they're flying by the seat of their pants. The whole situation between their amusement parks, the whole Star Wars situation right now, apparently there's this big fight between Lucas and Disney, and the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing, and they're arguing, and there's a bunch of fights going back and forth. This is stuff that we've heard. What happens from this going forward, we don't know. We absolutely don't know. And so right now, Disney is going to start reacting, and I think EA basically kind of they're kind of seeing this kind of coming forward, either that or they're trying to focus on things that they own more so. So yeah, this is kind of stuff that's breaking, and I'm going to, I'll keep my eye on it right now, but right now I can't guarantee anything because I don't even think the Bobs know what's guaranteed, right? If they don't even know, then there's nothing that's written in stone, and literally anything can happen, from whatever to whatever. But just so y'all know, don't be surprised when this all happens and when this all comes down out of the sky and everybody's like, oh my goodness, EA lost their license to make Star Wars games, and we just had 15 new Star Wars games announced from 15 other developers because they happen to be licensing the thing because they think they can make money on it.
Honestly, I don't think that'll surprise anybody.
No, that won't surprise anybody.
All right.
So, anyways.
That's okay. That was an important topic, though. It's really, looking at the future of these classic IPs. It's become the kind of thing where you just, personally, I just look to the future now. Mm-hmm. Look at what new. I'm hungry for new IPs that are really good and that people are going to treat with respect, because the old ones are just getting trashed and dumped on left and right. Because
there's a way to do new IPs. Jurassic Park, that's done really, really well.
Well, yeah, you can. If it's you can take an existing IP, a classic IP, and do it right and make new stuff even take it in a different direction, make new stuff with it that's really good and that respects respects the fandom of the old stuff, but still takes things in a new direction. Actually, I think Jedi Fallen Order is a good example. Just off the top of my head, I mean, amid a mass of bad movies and bad Star Wars games, Jedi Fallen Order was really good. And ironically, the development on that didn't even start out as a Star Wars game. But anyway,
yeah. Well, anyways, let's move on to the next.
Yeah.
Topic.
So
we can
the
talk about this forever.
the Unreal Engine 5 announcement, reveal, and tech demo happened this morning. I hope you got to see it live, or it's available on YouTube. It was broadcast on the Game Awards YouTube channel of all things. Jeff Keighley hosted it. And there was a couple of the developers from Epic sort of narrated a tech demo that happened, and then Jeff Keighley interviewed head Epic guy Tim Sweeney, and then two other people from Epic.
Did anybody else find it weird that Tim Sweeney had a one of those fusion balls just plugged in on the floor, just like behind him? Like he's like, hey, I should put something in the background. I know, I've got a fusion ball that I'll put on the floor.
If I've learned anything,
nobody else noticed this. I was like,
if I've learned anything about these eccentric billionaires who run these giant tech companies, it's that they know next to nothing about showmanship or presentation or marketing design or anything like that. So no, it doesn't surprise me. It wouldn't have surprised me if he had decorated the wall behind him with macrame, thinking, "Oh, this'll look fantastic." But anyway,
it was just super distracting for me because I kept on looking at him like, why does he have it plugged in on the floor? Like what would be cool is if he had like one of his mega computers behind him and like all set up, and then it was like in the middle, and he kind of created something, and everybody was like trying to like, is this like some kind of like hidden thing, secret or something? No, he just plugged in a glowy ball and put it on the floor. Not even on a desk or like a little like.
Yeah, he's probably just in his home and just like, oh, I need something behind me so it doesn't look boring.
But the thing is that the coolest thing about those lamps is that you have to touch them, but it's on the floor, which means either Tim spends a lot of time bent over in his house, or he spends a lot of time sitting or laying on the floor playing with a plasma lamp on the floor.
I think
again, this is real. Like I was like, what is going on here? Like I found it really distracting. But
I think you're overthinking this. I think it's just weird guy does weird thing, and I mean, whatever. Because I mean, it's Sweeney's not the most eccentric I've seen as far as tech billionaires go, but he's definitely kind of up there in some of the things he says. But anyway, I mean, so we got to see a tech demo of of Unreal Engine 5 running on a PlayStation 5. And it's no surprise, really. Epic's pretty tight with Sony, but it will be a multi-platform engine, so it'll be available. You can make games for any platform on it, including PC, Xbox, whatever. Now, no word on whether or not it'll be exclusive to the next gen consoles, or if you'll be able to run, if it'll be like kind of backwards compatible with projects created in Unreal Engine 4, or if you can create an UE5 and then have it run on like say a current gen console with reduced features or that kind of a thing. We don't know details like that at this point, but
I can answer most of that. So when it comes to game engines, specifically Epic's, it's not that hard to run a newer program on an older machine. Of course, you'll have to actually like export it as whatever older machine. to do that. But the thing that you'll run into is whether it has enough juice to run whatever.
Well, that's exactly it. And there's some features in this new engine, some new features in this engine that just will not work with with current gen hardware. You need a beefy PC to run it. Definitely not, a Xbox One or PlayStation 4 thing for some of these features, and we'll go through what some of those are. But what they really focused on, actually, what we should kind of define the parameters of this. This was a graphics tech demo. You'll see in the title today we said, okay, yes, Unreal Engine 5 looks great, but what about gameplay? This was our immediate question, because yes, it looks fantastic. It looks amazing.
Oh man, this is going to be great for machinima. This is going to be great for in-game filming. I was speaking with Last Known Meal just a few minutes ago, and he was very excited that because he does a lot of film stuff, and he's very excited. He says this is looking really cool for that visual component, for that stuff that can work in that way. And I could tell you for sure, things are going to get really weird in like Subverse 2, built on the Unreal 5 engine in 3 or 4 years. It's going to get all kinds of crazy. That said, the graphics are awesome.
You will just not pass up an opportunity to mention Subverse.
Well, anyway. It's a great news site. What are you talking about? It's great news for news and information and documentaries.
Well, the thing about the graphics in this new engine is they've got this technology that they're calling Nanite, which basically allows them to import film quality assets. So they made this demo using assets from Quixel Megascans, which is a library online where you can go and get models, you can get textures, you can get all of these things for doing digital graphics. And so they imported not the game quality versions of the models, but the cinema quality version, which we're talking, they had statues and things that had billions of polygons, or triangles as they called them in this. They had they had frames, individual frames of rendering would have billions of triangles of information as far as the architecture of the world around it, like the geometry of the world. Billions of polygons that they crunched, that were somehow crunched down into millions of data that was actually turned into the image and rendered in real time. It was pretty impressive. And what this means is that they've essentially done away with level of detail models. They've done away with having to bake in levels of detail into your models. So when you're playing a game and you get that phenomenon where as you get closer to an object, suddenly it pops into a higher detail mesh of the model, and it's very noticeable at times. And so, if it's done really well, you can do it fairly seamlessly. But you'll notice that you're playing Skyrim or something, and at different, basically it's at different distances, the models actually have more or less detail, so it requires less memory, less processing power to render things that are far away, which is fine, because it's like, okay, if that barrel is 100 feet away, you don't need to see the granular detail down to the sub-pixel. You can just use sort of a more rough version of it, and as you get closer, then it actually swaps out the model for one that has more detail. So this is one of the ways that they optimize graphics in games. They've been doing it for a long, long time now. So now, what they've done with this nanite technology is they basically eliminated that completely, and basically it dynamically decides the level of detail based on the distance you are from the object. And Digital Foundry had a good analysis of this, and they said it's basically like they try to keep it so it's like about one triangle of data is about the size of a pixel. So it's dynamically scaling the detail So you don't get that level of detail pop. You also don't need things like normal maps, bump maps, things like that, which were kind of ways of cheating to make things look more detailed than they actually are. If you don't know what all that means, that's fine. Basically all this means is that a lot of things the developers had to do to make the world look more detailed than it actually was, they no longer need to do. Basically, you can import a film quality asset into your world and go.
Right. Yeah.
And that is mind-blowing. So graphics-wise, it was a pretty impressive tech demo. They also showed off their new global illumination system, with which does, now it's not ray tracing, but they did refer to it as using bounce lighting. I couldn't tell you what the difference is there, but basically it's a new system of lighting that provides global illumination, with again reducing the need for any of the tricks that game devs used to have to put into games to make realistic looking lightings. Having dynamic lights in a video game, like lights that move around, it's very taxing on system resources. But they've come up with a way of really highly optimizing that in this Lumen system. So graphically looks amazing. They also featured some other stuff with their particle effects, fluids, the physics system, animation system, some neat stuff. But there was also some stuff that was noticeably absent in the demo, and well, I'll let Saib kind of run with this.
Yeah.
But what we saw was very, like, the most basic gameplay. We essentially saw a walking simulator through an amazingly rendered world. Granted, that looks fantastic, and they showcase things like rock slides and things like that, with some very detailed physics. But there's a lot we don't know. What are the capabilities of this engine in terms of character interacting with their environment? Mm-hmm. Can you just pick up a stone off the ground, manipulate it in your hand, and then just toss it away? Can you blast a hole through something in a dynamic way, not like in a scripted way, but like if you shoot a rocket at a wall, could you potentially blast a hole through that wall that would be different depending on the angle and location you shoot it at, and does it have that capability?
Yeah.
We don't know these things, but we didn't see them. And Saib, you suspect that if they had those capabilities built into the engine at this point, that they would have showcased stuff like that.
They most certainly would have showed off a lot of things, and you can see it in the way that they did a couple things. Now, to remind y'all, like, we saw E3 and BioWare at E3, BioWare and EA got up on stage and showed us Anthem. That entire trailer was faked. That entire trailer didn't exist. None of those, almost half of the things they did in that game did not exist when the game released. You had these fights between the NPCs. You had this collapsing stuff going on. None of that stuff exists. None of it existed in the game at any point. Those were only put together in a trailer. So trailers and these like gameplay things that people show you, you got to be real careful about. So there's a couple things here that again, the graphics great, but we go through this song and dance every single new console generation, and this is why some people say I'm anti Sony. I'm anti Sony because of what they do, not because of the concept of who they are. Sony a few years ago was great. It was fine. Years before that, ages ago, it was great. It was fine. I've rented them before. I never owned one because I'm not partial to owning consoles. The only console I ever owned was a special Mass Effect one, and I got it just to be merely entertained at the time because it was just easier to like port around other than bringing my computer everywhere. I'm not against consoles, but my major complaint with consoles is that the console generations stagnate gameplay because you have this cycle of new console, new graphics, graphics. Look at the graphics, look at the fidelity, look at how many polygons there are. This is the same conversation we have every time there's a new bloody console. The things that are never spoken about are gameplay, AI, and interactability. Those are things that are just not talked about in the initial release of either a console or a new game engine, like, you know, when they bring out a brand new game engine or an upgraded version of the game engine. It's always look at the graphics, look at this, look at that. And what we get is a reduction because they're always trying to push the graphics. The graphics end up taking up 95% of the processing power for a lot of these games, and less than 5% is then, you know, delegated to important things like, I don't know, inventory or character management. I remember playing games in the past where your character had like 18, 20, 25 different inventory slots, and everything you put on showed up on the screen. You know, some of these games were old, but you could still put on a pair of boots, put on a pair of like pants, put on a pair of the thingy, the skirt thingy, skirt or whatever you want to call it. You know, then put on like a chest piece, then put on like shoulder pieces, then put on armbands, and then put on your gloves, then put on rings, then put on an amulet, and this stuff could be seen in a lot of these games. And the more that we had this push towards graphics, the less we got of that. You remember back to like Morrowind and the older like Elder Scrolls games, you had like, you know, you had each piece was different. But then later on, the main armor piece was just the one thing. And modding has pushed that finally past that, and we're finally able to equip lots of different things. There's some really great mods for armor now, where it's like, hey, I want a sling to go around here that has one piece of armor that attaches to my neck. It's like you can do that now, but it took so long for the community to come up with that, and we're walking away from things that make the game have makes the game have life. You know, it makes it have like, you know, a diversity of things to do in that world, you know. And it's more about like you're sitting down and you're basically watching a movie, and you can't really interact with anything on the set. It's just everything is fake, everything is just artificial. It's just, you know, it's all you know, those old prop towns that they used to build. You know, you walk past the building, but there's nothing in the building. There's nothing even behind the building. It's just a fake 2D thing that's just standing there. And we've been moving in this cycle of like graphics, then, you know, and then games like Rome releases, right? You know, big title that releases with the console as it comes out, and what do we discover? Gameplay is crap. It's garbage. It's so mindless. And yes, the sets look pretty, but once you've seen the sets once, you're not impressed anymore. And the game doesn't have life. There's a whole bunch of games, like I remember every generation. It wasn't Sekiro, it was Sekuo? It was something like that. Something like that. It was this like really cutesy animated kind of thing, and like I remember the ads for that. It's like, look at the waves. The waves are awesome. Oh, look at this puzzle thing. And the gameplay was like, you blast through the game in like 4 hours. And it was like, well, that was it. Any replay? No. Any new gameplay? No. Nothing. There was nothing to it. It was just hollow. And it's like, yeah, it was good for like 5 hours, but that was it. And we get this again and again and again, where these consoles and these platforms come out with the new engines, and it's like, look at the pretty things, and then you walk into it, and then there's nothing there. It's just a pretty thing to look at. And we have to look at games like Minecraft to push the concept of like building an interactable world where you can actually like have have depth to this stuff. Like, you want to go through a wall, you can go through a wall. You want to dig down into a hole, you want to build yourself into the sky, you can do those kinds of things. 1864, that was another game where it was like, look at the graphics, and the gameplay was garbage. The story was garbage. The AI, remember the AI in some of these other games like Colonial Marines? The AI was garbage. And we get we get this huge advancement in graphics every time there's a new console. But the advancement, here's something that's crazy. Did you all know that most of the AI in shooters, like when you're playing a shooter game against like, NPC opponents, most of that AI is the same AI that was used back in like early shooters like Doom and Descent. If you remember Descent, same conceptual AI systems were built then as largely what is being used today. That's mind blowing to me that we haven't evolved past that. So is that something that Epic should be designing? Well, it should be, and if they had designed these advancements, they would have showcased them, because there's two things that they did showcase. They showcased when she was climbing on the wall, which wasn't a free range climbing experience. It wasn't like, hey, I'm just going to climb up this wall like you can in the Zelda game, right? Or in a lot of like Assassin's Creed games. It's like, I want to climb that thing over there, and you can go climb that thing over there, and there's some stuff, and it looks great and it's cool. That's awesome. In this game, it's like you can climb that wall. Which wall? That wall that has paint that runs up it. You just got to follow the paint. Well, can I move off of the paint? No, you can't move off the paint. You got to follow the paint. And that's what we saw in the demo. They followed a predetermined path for the character to climb. And if they had climbed anything, they probably would have shown that. They probably would have mentioned that. But the other thing they showcased, which was kind of cool, was the feet placement. Your character will find interesting places to put their feet. That's brilliant. Why didn't they show that for the hands? Because the hand system doesn't work. The hand system just plugs into the wall, clips through the wall like it normally does, because fingers are a whole lot harder to model than a foot.
You can see it also when at one point when she's passing through a narrow passageway and putting her hand on the wall, you can see like the hand does not connect with the wall.
Yeah, not really, not truly, not. It does a fine job,
at a glance. Like it looks, it's pretty good as far as, not to say that it's bad. I mean, it's definitely a step up from what was before.
Attack helicopter. Thank you very much for the £5. As is absolutely good. Funny. Something, the AI is going dumber and dumber since Fear. Fear had one of the best AIs. You're absolutely right. Fear had a really good AI system, and they were starting to push boundaries with that, but they walked away from that and decided to focus on like more shooty pew pew stuff. Which, I mean, that was always something that was kind of dumb. Like I remember I picked up the first Fear and I played it on Halloween night one year because I was like, oh, I'm gonna get scared, and it was like kind of mildly good. Then I played the next game and I was like, it was like the next mission I played further into the game and I was like, wow, this is not scary anymore. Why? Because I'm a walking death god. I've got guns and weapons and I can destroy anything, and what is there to fear when you have weapons and you can kill stuff? Nothing really, not in that case. But you're right. The AI has taken a backseat. Gameplay has taken a backseat, and as Ash, you were just saying, the character being able to connect with objects, that's still not. It's clearly not a priority to them. Yes, they had her. She walked into this door, and the character lifted up her hand and put her hand on the door, and they're like, "Yeah, there's this new system that allows the character to like reach out and touch things." Like, that's good, but if that system was really working well, why didn't she climb a vine, like a really like viney growth, And she's climbing up the viney growth, and she's putting her hands on the vines, and she's climbing up, and she grabs a rock out ledge here, and she pulls herself up with the vine over there. So why didn't you have that? They didn't. Well, have
in that particular case, they were he was talking about the animation system specifically and how the animations transition. But I want to read this comment here from Commander Jane Shepard. Says, maybe you shouldn't be so negative about the engine. We need to see gameplay from actual games.
No, and this is not an actual game. We need to be right about that. And again, I'm trying not to be negative because of the graphics. Again, the graphics are great. This is a great movement towards graphics, and I pray for the day that we hit a cap on graphical fidelity so that we can finally focus on developing some AI and some interactability with these worlds. Because in order for us to get games that really push the next generation, the boundary to the next world of of being able to immerse yourself into a game, it's not going to come through graphics. It's going to come through AI, and it's going to come through interacting with the world around you. Right now, again, it's every time I'm not, I don't want to be overly negative to the engine itself. And the gameplay, as far as the gameplay goes, you can transfer most games that are built in number 4 and have it transferred easily over to number 5. You can even take games that are built in 3 and transfer it over to 5 with very little updating work. The game will do, they've got all kinds of programs that'll help alleviate that stuff. But what I don't see them doing is I don't see them spending that time to invest in better AIs, into a better gameplay mechanical system that is actually new, not just something that we've had before. We've had yes, you can transfer all of the older games and put it in the new engine. Great, wonderful. Can you do that with, I don't know, like the gameplay? Yeah, you can do that with the gameplay. Is it going to create a better game? No, because the gameplay is what makes the game, good in most of these cases. And that's what hasn't been advanced on at all. There's no new system to make the gameplay better or to give, the developers more tools to create better gameplay. They just have it to make better graphics. Again, that's great for a lot of games, like Fallen Order. Fallen Order in this new engine is going new Fallen Order type games that they make is going to look even better, and that's great for what Fallen Order is. But that's bad when it comes to things like an open world exploration game. You're really not going to have a lot of those systems that are there because nothing has been improved for that kind of a thing. So you just have a pretty thing to look at, basically. And it's like, and very linear again.
Mm-hmm. But how much of that falls?
Be a very linear experience.
Well, and that's what we saw in this. Now, I wonder. I would be surprised if some of those tools and gameplay features are not in development, or at least the framework for those things to be put in. Because how much of this depends on the game developers? Like, how much of this is them saying, hey, I want my game to be able to do this. I want my character to be able to, go to a crafting bench and modify this axe however they want. They can add spikes to it. They can decide how big the blades are. They can just make it look however they want. And then they just pick it up off the bench and sling it across their back. And then they take that axe and they hit a log with it, and the log dynamically chops in two. And maybe the axe breaks. I want my game to be able to do that.
Like that's that.
If they want that, can they use, like, how much flexibility is there for them to say, I'll just, I'll build a module into this to make that happen? Or
so one quick sec. Polly's 911. Thank you again for the super chat. You're always awesome, and we love you. He says, yes, the smartest AI ever was the FPS shooter in the original Fear. But it was overshadowed because your character was given supernatural abilities. If you play Fear without using the powers, it's an insane experience. Yes, totally agree. Again, with the last comment on that, Fear 1 was an amazing experience because if you didn't use your powers and if you didn't use your weapons, it's a very scary experience. But you're given these powers and you're basically just this walking death god, and you're just like fear me, and it's like, shadows in the dark are scary because you're weak, you're alone, you're injured, and you don't have a weapon. If I have a minigun with unlimited ammo, I'm not going to be scared. It's like, oh look, I think I see a shadow over there. Well, let me just mow down, a couple hundred rounds in that location, and yeah, all right, well, whatever it was is definitely not moving anymore.
Killed the thing.
It's kind of that experience. So yeah. But as you're saying about the gameplay, it's like that dynamic stuff. Yeah, a lot of that is created by the developers working on particular titles. But there are a reason why some of these really old engines that have been around for 20 years are still being used to make very successful games today. Like the RPG Maker series games, it's a whole series of engines and tools. They give you the tools to do so much in that game, and they really focus on building up more and more tools and more abilities for you to give the player, as much interaction with the world as you want. You can make a push, you can make a puzzle game with ease in that. You say, I want to have the player push around these giant rock boulders, and they got to put them in a certain order at a certain time, and some of them can break, but not others, and that kind of stuff. That you can do almost instantly, and very easily in some cases. I mean, there's that one Salad game engine where with Salad you just drop and drag stuff, and that kind of concept of like giving the developers the tools to help them create more puzzles and more things on the fly, those things are becoming less and less and less important to the bigger developers of some of these things. And yeah, while you don't always have that show up in the case of like Anthem, right, and Frostbite, where it's like they're given this engine that, oh, sure, it looks great when you're using it as a shooter, but the minute you try and make an RPG mechanic out of it, the thing suddenly, like, screams, craps the pants, and runs around like a chicken with its head cut off. It's like it just can't handle that, and unfortunately, we have this issue here. So
Well, that's what I'm trying to understand. This is what we had a long discussion about this before the podcast, Saib and I, and the one thing I don't understand about this is how, like, how these, like, they didn't show like dynamic world destruction. They showed some stuff like some rock slides, and they showed some pillars falling over and stuff, but all of it looked like scripted events. I suppose it could have been dynamically created, but they didn't make any mention of that. They didn't point to it at all. So my question is this, though, because they have this new technology that where the level of detail problem is no longer an issue, it seems like they should be able to create completely dynamic geometry with objects. For example, say you have a rock and you hit it with a large hammer. And you could program it that, okay, the rock is going to break into 3 pieces. And you have an algorithm that's like, okay, it's going to break along these things. There's going to be some randomness to it, but it breaks into these 3 pieces. The game just takes that, turns it into 3 separate models instead of 1 model. And it should just work, because as our friend in chat here, EIIIN, I don't know how to say that, but anyway, EIN or something, says 60% of time developing a game is spent optimizing 3D assets and textures. It's very true. I don't know if it's exactly 60%, but there's a lot of time that goes into that. And if you have an engine that eliminates all of that, theoretically you have resources to focus more on gameplay. Yeah. So could that, I don't know, could it result could that just be a bump in gameplay because they don't have to spend so much time optimizing assets and things?
So yeah, and I mean this is where we're going to see this obviously evolve over the next few years. There's going to be some, and this is the thing with there's a lot of like older, Unreal games that they start to create some really interesting tools for, but every time they create a new one, some of those tools that aren't like created by the studio, well, most of them that aren't created by the studio, they have a hard time transitioning. And it takes a lot of work to get them running, again, back onto number 4. And sometimes you have a lot of bugs and issues with that. And it's just something where it's like, I look at it and I'm like, wow, this looks great. I was a little disturbed. One thing the thing that disturbed me the most is that they didn't show what happened to most of the rubble after it hit the ground. Because, I mean, I remember this being something that was showcased a lot. It's like, look, you can take out this tree and this tree will fall over and it'll form a chasm across a bridge. But what's cool about that is that's not a scripted event. You could do it to every tree along the path. And everybody's like, oh, wow, that's amazing. And that truly is amazing. But they didn't show that kind of a concept here where they could have. And I think it's because everybody knows that you're not going to be able to do that. You're not going to be able to do that at all. When objects fall over, they're going to smash into a million pieces and then vanish, disappear. However long it's going to take, they're just going to go away. You're not going to be able to, like, in other games, in other game engines, that they're working on. When I say they, I mean like studios and such. Larian, a couple other ones. You can build a stack. You can stack crates to make it so that you can climb up, and get out of a hole. This is something you can do in their engine, which is amazing. I don't think there's any capability in this engine to do anything even remotely as close to that. Even the fact that these are the guys who built Fortnite. I suspect right now, until they get that crossover, which might take a year or more for them to do that. I mean, they might be able to transition most of it over with ease, but I suspect that they're going to run into some issues with some certain stuff, and yeah, it'll be interesting to see where they end up. But for the moment, I got to look at this and I'm gonna shake my head and say, I it's nice that they're working on graphics. It really is, and I'm excited for the day that we'll finally hit a point where we can't tell the difference between the next upgrade and the last upgrade as far as the visual fidelity goes, and people will finally look at them and say, can we please have a new AI system? I would like to be able to talk to an AI and feel connected to that AI when it's just a random NPC. I like I think that's in order for us to live in a, if we're ever going to get upgraded, into a server somewhere, brain, like full dive or brain scan or whatever, we've got to have an interactable world. And it just seems to me that again and again and again, a lot of these studios, not all of them, because like Solarian's working on this, it's like the environment means nothing to them. The showing you a picture of the environment is super impressive, and they want to do that, but they don't want to give you the tools to actually change the environment. And it's that kind of a thing that really is going to push the next jump in gameplay. And then when it comes to AI is something that has been stagnant for decades. It has been spinning its wheel for decades. Even some of the latest, greatest Boston Dynamic robots that they've been making run off of really basic scripts that we haven't improved upon for such a long time. And it's like, if we want to get past this, we have to start, putting effort into this. And big companies like Epic are not doing that. They could care less about the AI. The same AI that they've been using for the last 10 years, in some of their games, their AIs are just, I mean, it's appalling, like how stupid some of their AI is. Not just them, like, again, a lot of different companies. MMOs are one of the worst things. The AI just stands there, and if you get too close to it, it'll attack you, and then it rotates through its abilities, and that's it. Does it ever feel like it needs to lay down? Does it ever feel like it needs to like go do something to make the world seem or look more alive? No, they don't even do that in most cases. And it's like we're waiting for this stuff to happen, and the only people that we're seeing like pushing this are other smaller companies. So I mean, it's happening again. It's I don't want to come off as being too nitpicky in this subject, but when we can finally get there, please, can we finally get there? Polly's again with the super chat. Thank you so much again. And Alien Isolation is a good example of smart AI. It really makes me feel scary when I have smart alien you can't kill hunting your ass while you hide and cry internally and try not to breathe. This is a great example. And this is another thing where it's like Alien Isolation. That game showed some real promise and it was really good. And then they announced the next one and it was like a mobile game. And it was like, great. Thanks, guys. I don't know if you've noticed, but we haven't really heard very much out of them ever since then. It's kind of sad. I'm just saying, mobile market, yeah, it's where a lot of money is these days, and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not, I the only other thing that I'll say in the negative, because let me enforce this. Largely, this was a good showcase. Showcases a lot of great tools, a lot of great advancements. It's at least some advancements, right? Like it's over top of 4. Obviously, there's been some massive upgrades as far as visual, lighting, a whole bunch of other stuff that's really great. That's awesome. And it's better to get some advancements than to get no advancements, right? But I gotta say that looking at this, you know, the only other thing that really bothered me was how Tim went on his little speech again about having, about giving the developers the tools and the abilities to have their players play on any platform and on any service that they wanted to. Meanwhile, he's still locking down games to be exclusives for his stupid platform. It's so hypocritical that it makes me physically ill whenever I hear him say that. Like, we're giving the power to the developers so that they can do what they want. Unless that do what you want is to release on both your platform and on Steam. It's just, wow. Wow, it's so fake. The other thing that he does is he's got some tools, really great tools. Really great, really helpful for developers. Really, really is. I would fear if those tools ever found their way into, I don't know, the hands of, say, a big country that owns a huge chunk of land and doesn't care for civilian rights whatsoever, that maybe has a bunch of shell companies that invest in other companies so that they can steal proprietary technology. I mean, that technology in their hands would be scary AF. And I certainly hope that Epic doesn't have a massive stake in it, because as long as Tim is alive and running the company, sure, I suppose it won't go full, 1984, but these tools in the hands of 1984 probably not going to be it's just not gonna fly over well. So I mean, there was that. It was a very minor thing as far as that goes. I really hope these companies start to prioritize, guaranteeing basic freedoms in the future. If I have an opinion on a city state that wants to separate from its overlords, I shouldn't be banned and sued or silenced into the ground because of that opinion. It would just be nice. So that's my only other worry. But as I've said before, that has very little to do with the tech guys there's two other tech guys that work on the engine. Those guys do a really good job working on that engine, because that's their job, is they make the engine for the Unreal Engine. They make the tech behind it, the visual tech behind it. And again, they are probably second to none in the industry. They make amazing visual concepts. Yes, this technology has actually been around for quite a while. We already know that Bethesda has been working on this for years, and they have been scanning in their own assets to use in their own game and in 12K picture referencing scans. They've been doing that for years now for the upcoming next Elder Scrolls entry, which is still several years away. But they have been doing that for a very, very long time. And so have half a dozen other companies that I know off the top of my head have been doing this. So this is the first time it's been announced and showcased. That's great and all. And these guys are doing a good job. Good job. I don't want to demean or diminish their work at all. But as far as all of the other stuff, I felt a little sad. Again, not because it's Epic, just because it's sad that nobody's coming out with a new AI system, and it's like, that's what we really need to make games jump the next generation. We really haven't had a jump to the next gen games. There's been no next gen games for the last 15 years.
Right. I do want to come, I don't feel quite as pessimistic as you about this, just because it seems like that these are all things that they could integrate. Mm-hmm. And like Funky was talking about in the chat, and I agree that a lot of it comes down to the how the games are actually developed, in terms of materials interacting with each other, or having having destructible environments. And it feels like graphically this engine could support fully destructible environments, just because of that. You don't have the need to model everything at different levels of detail, and have that be a painstaking manual process. It seems like you could write a script that says, okay, I want you to, you take this object, if it encounters this set of circumstances, it breaks in this way, and then it just dynamically, shatters or whatever, and the engine can handle that. It seems like it should be able to handle that. And I wonder how much of it is just that they just wanted to show off the graphics, and there may be more coming for it that we just haven't seen yet.
Ooh, we should also mention so a whole bunch of news got leaked about Elder Scrolls 6, Redguard, a bunch of storyline, plot stuff, characters, setting, all that kind of. It's all bunk. It's all bunk, guys. It's all bunk. It was put down pretty quickly, and the source was outed as a fake. So, yeah, while it still may take place in Redguard, still might have some generalized plot things that are kind of similar. That is of course a possibility. The particular leak that came out and said, "Hey, look, here's a leak from Bethesda," was absolutely not true. That came out like yesterday, or no, day before yesterday, I think it was. I glanced at them. I noticed like three things right off the bat that set off like the alarm bells. I was like, yeah, no, that's not true. And then it got outed as a fake. So yeah, don't expect to hear a thing out of Elder Scrolls 6. People wonder. Somebody was asking, why did they announce Elder Scrolls 6? And this is real simple, really simple. Why did they announce Starfield and Elder Scrolls 6 when they announced 76 and Blades? Because the only thing that they had to show was Blades and Elder Scrolls, or the Elder Scrolls Blades and Fallout 76. Both of those games are not their regular games. One is a mobile game, and the other was a really terrible piece of garbage that should have gone into internal development and alpha testing for another 2 years. The primary reason is they wanted to show that they have another single player game coming that is called Starfield. But then the question would follow up from that as well. Okay, so you're showing us you've got some multiplayer and online stuff and mobile stuff coming. You do have another single player game, but I don't know what I don't know what Starfield is. Why should I care about it? And the answer is that they're not going to care about it until they actually see something from the game. That's why they also announced Elder Scrolls at that particular time as well. So that way they had four things. They had their newest project coming up for the PC and the consoles. They had their mobile game coming up. Both of those were multiplayer. They had to reiterate the fact that they are making single player games. And then they also had to iterate that they're also continuing to make the series of games that they're known for making, and that they're making those things without changing anything really that comes out of them. We're going to get Elder Scrolls 6, and it is going to be another Elder Scrolls game. It may have some multiplayer connectivity to it, but it will not be built around that for sure. I can guarantee you this because you can just look at their hiring. They haven't hired anybody for that kind of a multiplayer thing, and they're not going to go into that blindsided, not after what happened with 76. Same thing with Starfield. And then when you ask about Fallout, are we going to get a Fallout 5? Yes, we're going to get a Fallout 5. Is it going to be, in keeping with the, Fallout 3 and Fallout 4? Absolutely. They want that mobile market. They want that online market. That doesn't mean that they're going to walk away from this. They are 100% behind that. Now, again, you may not trust them, but you don't have to trust them. You just have to look at who they're hiring for. And they're not hiring for multiplayer people. They're not doing that. They don't have the capacity to do that going forward. So we're not going to get a Starfield that's centered around multiplayer and microtransactions. It's just not going to. It's not coming that way. So, anyways, that's why I've seen that question floating around a lot lately. I wanted to explain that because it's like they don't normally announce their stuff ahead of time. They announce this ahead of time because they want you to be excited for Starfield, but you don't know what Starfield is, so hey, be excited for Elder Scrolls 6. So, anyways. Oh yeah, Fallout in Hawaii. I would love that, Wonka bars. That is a really good concept. I want to see, like, we saw Alaska a little bit. It was pre-war, but we saw Alaska. But I'm kill to get a good look at I would kill to get a good look at that other thing. So, yeah.
All right, and just finally, kind of wrapping up our discussion about consoles and graphics. Like graphics, so obviously the PS5 hardware is really beefy to be able to run what we saw in the Unreal Engine 5 demo. And this is kind of what we were hoping to see from Xbox. Like, what can you actually do? We talked about this on the previous podcast. What are we actually going to see, not just in terms of graphics, but also in terms of gameplay? And they didn't show us any of that. And so, they showed us pre-rendered cutscenes. Or not necessarily pre-rendered, but in-engine cutscenes, and then called it gameplay. And it's like, that's not gameplay. But it's been revealed today. Was it today? Yesterday, sorry. That Ubisoft has guaranteed, or they have announced that Assassin's Creed Valhalla will run at least 30 frames per second on the Xbox Series X. So what are they doing over there? If they can't get this game to run they can't guarantee 60 frames per second on the Xbox Series X? What's happening? Are these game developers, are their priorities in the wrong order? Are they focusing too heavily on graphics above gameplay, or graphic?
Yes. The answer to that is yes. The push from the leadership has always been, hey, we want graphics above everything else. We have to have 8K graphics before our competitor has 5K graphics. We have to have this before that. We have to have I want to see the I was going to say something gross, but I want to see the pores on a person's neck before we have 60 frames a second, because it's one of those things where people say, hey, I want 60K frames, and they're like, or we can give you a super awesome thing that has super awesome 8K graphics.
Yeah, no thank you.
And what
I would happily play at 1080p over 4K if it gives me a better frame rate. Like if
what they have routinely found in their internal testings and the testing in game markets is that that's not the case. That people will continue to buy something that's running at 30 frames over top of something that's running at 60 frames with lesser graphics, because it's just the way that some people think. And what's better is that the consoles will always have their fanboys who, when you say, hey, I want this at 60K frames, there will always be somebody who comes out and announces and says, hey, you can't even tell the difference between 30 frames and 60 frames, even though there's actual scientific studies that have shown that we can track up to 120 frames a second, that some people can. Not every human can do that, but there are humans that can track that or higher. There's a lady who can see, she's got like super eyes. She's like, seriously, I was reading about her case study a little while ago, and she can see alterations in color spectrum that most computers have a hard time with. And she can do it reliably. Not only that, she can read small print at like 20 or 40 feet. I can't remember which it was. She can read small print on a page book, on a standardized page, at 40 feet. It's like, wow. I hope, yeah.
That's a different
stuff
thing,
like
though.
that. Well, yeah, it is. Well, not really. It's the eyes. It's like what can some eyes see. Some eyes can see that. Some eyes can't. And there's a lot of people who will defend the whole 30 frames a second, man. It's all you need. Just cause. And this big studios know this, and they nod their heads and they say, "Yep, that's it. That's how it's gonna go. That's how it's gonna work. We don't care." Because that's all they care about is pushing out the graphical fidelity first, then following it up with the optimization later. And in most cases, as everybody knows, we never get 60 frames on games anyways. It's not like they don't even take games from the last generation, upgrade them to 60K, and then put them on the new console. And they're like, hey, play this on 60 FPS. They don't even do that. And yeah, there's a lot of people who get really tired of it. I mean, I want 60 frames per second, but there's a lot of people who they don't care, and they don't care enough to make enough noise about it. So it's kind of weird. It's kind of a thing where they like right now when the developers see some people spamming 60K or 60 FPS in the chat when they're doing like a trailer or when they're doing like a live showcase, all of the developers are told it's a meme, nobody cares. That's what they're told. And when you go into a marketing campaign, when you go into the marketing meeting, marketers tell them the exact same thing. It's a meme, nobody cares. Right? They did the same thing with single player. They did the same thing with a bunch of this other stuff. It's absolutely mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling. Absolutely insane. Mm-hmm. So there it is. So yeah.
Yeah, and I definitely like. There's some discussion in the chat about does it make a it absolutely does make a difference. If you playing a game, if you ever get a graphics card upgrade that allows you to boost the frame rate of your game significantly on a PC, you'll feel the difference. It's more than just about seeing. Like, watching something in progress, you're not necessarily going to say, oh, I see that's running at 46.7 frames per second. But you feel a difference in the overall experience of it. The responsiveness of the game, the lack of stuttering. It was so apparent in the Outer Worlds when I got my graphics card upgrade. The increase in frame rate went from... That was a game that was causing a lot of people simulation sickness. I don't get simulation sickness playing a video game. I can play a crazy first-person game, flipping in every direction, and it just doesn't happen to me. I don't get that motion sickness, but I was feeling a little queasy playing the Outer Worlds on my old graphics card. I had to optimize the settings very particularly to make that not happen. So that game was particularly bad for it. Upgraded my graphics card so that everything's running at an incredibly high frame rate at the max graphics. There was no issue whatsoever. So, I mean, it does make a difference. It does make a difference. Your eyes are used to the world around you. I mean, the world around us runs at, I don't know, infinity frames per second. I don't even know what you'd call it. The eyes, when I was in science class, when I was a kid, I was taught... Speed. It runs at light speed, exactly. But when I was a kid, I was taught, your eyes run at they capture frames at about 10 frames per second. That's what I was taught. And so, for a long time, I was like, what does this matter? Like, what does it matter, 30 frames versus 60 frames per second? It's running faster than your eyes, but I've come to believe that was way off because, it does make a huge difference.
Yeah.
So, anyway, but I mean, if you're fine with playing on 30 frames per second, that's all power to you. And somebody pointed out also that if you're running on a TV, playing on a console on a TV in your living room might be better than it's a slightly different experience than playing on a PC with the monitor up close. And so it's that I'm not much of a console gamer. I don't game on Xbox or PlayStation. I have a Nintendo Switch. I couldn't tell you how much of a difference the frame rate would make to me on the console, but I do notice it on PC. Anyway, still I feel like 30 frames, promising that it'll run at least 30 frames per second. I think in 2020 is a sad benchmark. Like, yeah, that's like saying I don't know. It feels like this movie's going to be in 720p. Okay, so it's better than standard def, I guess. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I think that's all we have for today. Any final words, Sib?
No. I think we're good enough. Look, again, I'm really excited for the new projects that we'll see on the next Unreal 5 engine. I have know a lot of people. I have a lot of friends who work on indie games, and Unreal is a decent engine. It has always been a decent engine, and I'm in no way, shape, or form, or however you finish that colloquialism, that I'm disappointed with the graphical fidelity that they have. I only wish that we had as much, not even as much. It's like 95% of development time is spent on graphics, and 5% is spent on gameplay and smaller things in some cases. And I just kind of wish that it was like, that they were really trying to push the gameplay depth and the AI as much as they were trying to push the graphical stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So,
but this might shift that. This might
hopefully, like I said,
it's that easy to create the graphics, you just drop the asset in, and you don't have to worry about optimizing it. You don't have to worry about bump mapping it. You just you just drop it in and go, and your lighting is dynamic. You don't have to worry about baking in lighting. You don't have to worry about there's just a lot of work there that the engine is going to take care of that people no longer have to do manually. That gives more time for developers to focus on gameplay stuff. So that you might get your wish there, even if it wasn't featured, up front and center.
Yeah, it might be a secondary effect. So fingers crossed. Hopefully looking forward to it again. It's good. There's good days ahead for gaming. It's just there's certain things that I feel are being forgotten about, and I kind of hope that they get caught up at some point. So,
all right, and with that, we'll wrap up the show for today. So thank you so much, everybody, for the great conversation in the chat, for supporting the show by listening live or after the fact. Don't forget to slam that like button before you leave. And also continue on the conversation in the comments. If you're listening after the fact, let us know what you think about all of this. And also join our Discord server. You can find the link to that in the description below. Open invitation. Come join us. We have a room set up for talking about technology. We have a room set up for gameplay and a variety of other topics. And there's always tons of fantastic conversation happening. So definitely join up there. Become a part of the community. It'd be great to have you. Special thanks to our Patreon supporters and channel members who help to make this content possible. Our big darn heroes on Patreon, Josh, Robin, Timebean, and our two anonymous supporters at that tier there, and also to those at the other tiers. We appreciate you as well very much. Also, our channel members on YouTube, Mr. Padzernick, Jer Schultz, Game Notes, Night City Punk, and Terror K. Appreciate you very much as well. If you're listening after the fact on one of the audio-only platforms, we appreciate your interactions there as well. Don't forget, you can join the live show Wednesdays and Saturdays, where you can interact with us and other listeners and be a part of the discussion live on YouTube. See the Discord server for exact times and schedules. The Augmented Reality Podcast is a presentation of the Triple S League. Check out our YouTube channel for game guides, reviews, comedy, news updates, tons more quality gaming content. My name is Ash. On behalf of Subsidian, thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you again very soon.